We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to another edition of AVRant. I'm Tom Andrew, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AVRant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. I have my fingers crossed over here because we're having I'm having glitches on my computer. So I'm hoping this podcast is reaching your ears, and if you're on YouTube, your eyes as well. That would be good if that all worked out.
I hope so.
Yeah, we hope so.
I'm recording my side.
Yes.
Everything's working fine on this side.
That's right, okay. And I've got a waveform going over here on my end, so we're gonna say that that's good for now, and if you're hearing this, then it all worked out for the best. Hooray.
Yeah. All right. How you been, Rob? Start off mellow.
Yeah, that's pretty low key there. Doing okay. Plenty going on behind the scenes, keeping me busy and all that. But I'm not going to share too much publicly at this time. So
I'm sleepy.
Yeah. Okay. Is that what it is? Low energy Tom this week.
Low energy Tom.
Okay.
That's right. I don't understand. I didn't get up super early. I've had plenty of coffee. I'm just dragging.
Well,
I
I know the feeling that happens sometimes. There is something that we do know is not low energy anymore, though, because you sent me a text over the weekend. Very, very amazing update going after our talk last week about the SoundPeats Space headphones. Major update has taken place. We must know.
Well, I charged it.
You charged them.
Right. I charged them.
For the first time.
I charged him. It took the span of recording the podcast plus a little bit. So I'm going to say somewhere between 2.5 to 3.5 hours to fully charge them back up. And then I listened to them for another 2 or 3 hours. And they're still at 100%.
They remained at 100%. So it seems as though, yes, you can charge them at least once, and no,
at least
they don't suddenly start dropping like a stone as far as the charge level goes after that single charge. So they should make it through the year. There should be 4 charges, including the initial one out of the box. It should be all right for your $89 or $49 on sale.
I think I saw them for $60.
That's great.
Right after the podcast, they were on sale for $60. So yes, they are still going strong. Dang, things will never die.
That's been the saga.
Yeah, so what did you watch this week, Rob?
Yes, indeed. Yeah, I watched a couple of movies. Must say, both of them quite glum, quite on the downer side of things.
I did see the first one that you have listed here. So
you saw that one?
I have already talked about it on this podcast.
I don't remember it, but I watched The Northman, and I don't remember what Tom thought of it.
I thought that I was told that man was going to be shirtless the entire time, and he was not. He wore a big baggy shirt the whole time.
yeah. I guess. Yeah. I mean,
he looked like a burlap sack on him the whole time.
He was shirtless some of the times. That was Alexander Skarsgård, the eldest of the Skarsgård sons, playing someone who was, I think, supposed to be about 15 years younger than he was in real life, but he pulled it off. It was all right. It wasn't too bad. He was a hulking looking figure on that screen.
Yes, of course, he was.
Actors, when they look very muscular on screen, they're typically, if you saw them in real life, you'd be like, oh, they're actually kind of rail thin, which is how you make all the muscles stand out when it's on screen. Yes. But I mean, he's like 6'5" in real life, so when he looks that big, he would still be a pretty imposing guy in real life if you came across him. The Northman. I mean, I don't know how much Tom said about this before, but I mean, like it's based on an old Viking myth.
Yes,
and it is the basis for Hamlet by Shakespeare. I mean, he took the story of Amleth, the Viking, and converted that into Hamlet. And so the Northman has this, the movie has this sort of difficult task of course, most people are much more familiar with Hamlet than they are with the legend of Amleth, the Viking myth. And so they had sort of the opportunity, because one of the problems with Viking mythology is that very little was ever written down. It's why the Greek myths have survived, because they were written down in some form, whereas the Viking myths were largely just oral tales, and they weren't really written down. Now, there was this legend of Amleth that was written by somebody in the 12th century, even though it took place in like the 9th century, and was a converted tale there. So The Northman as a movie sort of had this choice of they could go to the written version that exists, which is clearly not what they did because the story in there was significantly different. Right. They could go to some of the retellings that were done in the 15th and 17th centuries that started to much more resemble what Shakespeare had written in Hamlet, or they could try to basically do a version of Hamlet, but with more Viking pillaging going on.
Yes.
And it seems like that's kind of where they landed, because this had more similarity to Hamlet than even the original legend did, but with a whole lot more violence, the Viking stuff that Viking pillagers and berserkers were doing. But they also tried to sort of copy a bit of Shakespearean language, it seemed, which I thought to not very good effect. It's like... You have to go in. I think it's important to go into this movie kind of knowing that you are watching a mythological tale, because otherwise the early dialogue might kind of just pull you out of things, because they're speaking in this very vague, and each person has a completely different take on a vaguely Eastern European accent, because nobody sounds like they came from the same region or family. They all have a different, is it...
I vaguely remember this movie, to be honest with you. Yeah.
Is it like a little bit Russian? Is it like a little bit Swedish? Is it like a little bit Danish? Kind of jumbled up, not...
kind of felt like they were just
very authentic
this
accent.
Is my accent.
That's
I'm going with this
pretty
one.
much it. I don't know why everybody just didn't listen to Alexander Skarsgård and copy him, because he's the main character and he's Swedish, and it's like just go with the accent he was doing. That could have been done.
The guy who's going to be doing the most talking.
Yes,
go with him.
But all the dialogue, it seemed like they were kind of trying to ape a Shakespearean style a bit, but I mean it very much did not make me believe that this is the way the Vikings spoke whatsoever. It certainly wasn't going for realism on that side.
I never felt like that movie felt very real at all at any point. They weren't really going for it.
On the other side of things, they did attempt to go realistic with the lighting and the music. And I don't actually think either of those was a good choice, because by going with realistic lighting, it means you could barely see anything, and I was very glad to have an OLED to watch this movie, because it is all in the shadows and darkness.
I watched it on the projector, and there were definitely some scenes I'm like...
Yeah, there's a muddy mess of what is going on.
What is going on the screen?
Yeah, this is not a colorful or bright movie. The lighting matches the tone. It is dark, and you can barely make out what's going on, but on an OLED, it was at least viewable. And then the music, I really felt like this is a movie that needed John Williams' score. If it had music that was that good and that memorable, I think it really could have elevated things. Whereas they went for pretty authentic of the time instruments, not particularly complex or memorable score going on there, and it didn't. While it wasn't bad, it just didn't help to elevate this movie whatsoever. So some of the CGI that was there, pretty ropey because it was a very small budget. So yeah, I mean, all of that criticism aside, I felt like definitely everybody in this movie was giving it their all. The performances were all there. It was nicely shot for how dimly shot it was. But yeah, the phrase by the end of this movie that came to my mind, I'm a big fan of Film Cow, all the animations that they do over there, and the Llamas with Hats series that he's currently promoting. He's going to do a new epilogue. I supported that on Kickstarter. But one of the fun lines in there was just, you sure do like your yelling, which is what I thought largely of the Northman, because they sure did like their screaming at one another with no words going on. And they liked their killing too. There were many a gruesome death. So pretty thumbs in the middle. I don't want to give it a thumbs down. I didn't think it was bad, but I can't say I was over the moon about it.
I got to the end of that movie and went, well, okay.
Yeah, and it had the very difficult task of course, Hamlet is so much more well-known that it's like, well, you're going to either think this is copying Hamlet, which it isn't, because this story came first, but then they didn't do the thing of actually separating from Hamlet the way they easily could have by going closer to the original legend, or at least the earliest written down version of the legend that we have. So they went for something that allowed for a bit more action, a bit more of a direct revenge tale, and this is what we end up with. And so thumbs in the middle for that for me. So the other movie that I watched was the Amazon Prime Video original, You Were Never Really Here, which is Joaquin Phoenix, playing the main character. This is another bit of a sort of solo man revenge tale going on. That's a pretty common thing here, but very, very dour, very, 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 very glum. Certainly you're not going to watch this movie to put you in a better mood. I found it... Oh, gosh, I'm very of split minds here, which the reviews are very split amongst this as well, because it is fairly slow-paced, but does some interesting things, doesn't hold your hand at all, doesn't go into a long backstory tale. This is very much a judge people by their actions movie. It's not going to try to necessarily make you, really feel for their motivations or that type of thing. You're sort of watching what they do, and you judge them by what they do. He's a man of very, very, very few words. So it's not going to be an explanation of what's going on. Essentially he is a former vet of some sort. We don't know exactly where he used to be stationed. He is now like a contract killer for essentially, not always killing, but he's hired by people who have lost a child, and he goes and finds the people who have abducted the child and does horrible things to them, and to try and get the child back. Now, of course, this ends up being going up the political chain, and it made me rather uncomfortable and makes me uncomfortable as I'm speaking right now to even talk about it, because it sort of hints at some of the stuff. This movie came out in 2017, but it sort of hints at some of the stuff that has now become conspiracy theory fodder, quite common stuff that you see on QAnon crap. And I don't think that this movie was necessarily doing that on purpose, because it's not like this is an idea or a tale that we haven't really seen before. But speaking of it now, it kind of hints at stuff that has been grossly twisted in current times. So it's a little bit difficult to talk about this movie 7 years later.
It's like making a movie about the space landing being faked.
Right.
It's when that movie was made, perhaps.
Right.
If it was made long enough
ago. If it were years ago.
It was just some sort of funny thing that people said.
And that idea, it's not like that was a brand new idea that didn't exist until recently. That notion was floated out there in the past. But so it's hard to watch movies sans current context. I have
a really hard time watching a lot of stuff that was made before 2020, to be honest with you. There's a lot of stuff that happened in 2020 that completely changed the way that I enjoy my media. Like, I'm like, oh, this one hasn't aged well.
Right.
So I see where you're coming from.
Yes, yeah. So I don't want to speak too deeply or specifically on it. Joaquin Phoenix, of course, fantastic performance. Is he ever bad? And I mean, it was kind of interesting to me because, of course, having seen him in Joker and having seen how rail thin he got himself for that performance in Joker, it's like the opposite. He's like, buffed up in this one. So the amount of physical transformation that he does as an actor is certainly impressive. A little scary, honestly. It can't be healthy to make your body go to those extremes on either end.
Talk to Christian Bale about healthy, I guess.
Yeah, no kidding. But so this one, obviously don't watch it for a good time. I will say, just completely aside from story and all of that type of stuff, just on the technical side of things, somebody in the production of this movie went a little bit ham when it came to dynamic range. They were like, we are going to showcase dynamic range in this movie because there are some exceedingly quiet whispering scenes and you've got to have your volume pretty much up to reference volume to there, and then they blast you with a full-on cinema reference volume peak that comes on there. Now, to good effect, because the character mentally is like jarring himself back and forth. He's clearly got PTSD. He is clearly got suicidal ideations, and those scenes are flashed in there, and then he is kind of jolting himself back into the current situation, and so the sound goes along with that. Not always simultaneously. Sometimes, he's not experiencing that, and we as the audience get one of these massive changes in dynamic range, but it helps us sort of feel along with, empathize with the state of mind that he's in, and does that to good effect. But don't be watching this movie late at night if you don't have a soundproof theater, because there are some dramatically louder dynamics in this movie, and some pretty good surround swirling effects. Didn't hear much going overhead, but going around you and left to right batting, again, to sort of put you in that jarring mindset.
And this was made for Amazon specifically? Is that what you said?
It was made specifically for Amazon Prime Video.
It's weird that they had a lot of dynamic range in it for a movie that was made to stream directly into your house.
Yeah, no, it seems like somebody in the production side of things got themselves a little freedom and decided to go whole hog with it.
Somebody wasn't paying attention to what was going. Somebody forgot to hit compress at the end at the output stage.
This is one I wouldn't blame someone from applying a little bit of dynamic range compression if you want to make sure that you're not jarring anybody else in the house awake. That was me. What did you watch, Tom?
Once again, I had a very busy weekend. It was Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day.
It we was. Didn't say that last week. Happy belated Mother's Day, yes.
Yeah. So it was a busy weekend all around. We very rarely go to parties or get invited to parties. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you've met me, but I don't get invited to a lot of parties. And I think after this week, I'm going to get invited to one fewer.
Okay.
That's for sure.
All right.
Because I kind of got in a bit of a tiff with somebody who I thought was being rude to me. So I upped the ante. Anywho, So we got invited to 2 parties at the exact same time, so I had to go do all that. But I didn't watch much. I am still working on rewatching my old catalog and stuff like that. But nothing really important to say except that I started watching The Good Place again, which I have not seen since COVID.
Did you get through the whole series when you first watched it? Okay. So this is a true rewatch.
Yes, I will tell you. Mm-hmm. First of all, Kristen Bell.
Yeah,
Jesus, she is so dang good. I remember, so I didn't really know who she was because I never saw Veronica Mars when it was out,
which was certainly where I think she garnered the most fame to begin with. I'm sure she did things before that, but I had never really seen her before Veronica Mars.
My first experience with her really was Heroes.
Oh, okay.
The TV show.
Pretty small role in that, all things considered, but okay.
Yes, but the thing was, they were hyping him up. Kristen Bell's coming to Heroes, and I was like, "I'm sorry, who? I'm sorry, who? Who is this?" I had no idea who she was, and she was amazing in it. And I was like, "Okay, she's really good." And then she was in that Frequency movie or whatever it was called, the one with it was one of the Japanese horror movie remakes for the American audience. Okay. She was in that, and then of course she's been in a bunch of other stuff. But God, she's so good. And now that. Yeah, I really go back and put some time on it. Go back and rewatch it. And I know what the twist is, if you will, at the end of season 1. Yes. If you haven't seen it, I won't spoil it. But the number of hints going up to this thing, and they're not hints either. I mean, it's just there, so obvious.
Yep.
As you're getting closer and closer, and how I actually think the season starts off. It starts off pretty weak, in my opinion. The first couple episodes, I'm like, I mean, it's not. It's okay.
Yeah, it's not the strongest part of the series for sure.
Yeah, it's okay, but it's not. It's not all that. It's not nothing special.
Yeah,
but to get to episode 3 or 4 and where things really start ramping up, you're like, this is really getting good, and you're really invested. And the fact that the actors have talked about the reveal to them, because they didn't know until they saw the script the day of or whatever it was. They didn't know, and their shock, it just goes to show you that when you're invested in these characters, when you really care about the characters and what's going on with them, how little you pay attention to the actual story that's going on around them. You're so invested in them that the writing is so good, and Chidi and the actor who plays him is just, the whole time you're feeling for him. The actor who plays Jason it's just everything about that show is just, and Ted Danzig, who I love, is probably the weakest part. Somehow he's the weakest part, and that's like saying, he's the weakest on the Magic Johnson whatever basketball team they took to the Olympics that one year where they just stomped on everybody. Yes. I mean, that's what I'm talking. I mean, there's times when I'm like, I bet he wants another take at that one. I bet he'd want to do that one again. If he saw that, he'd go, I could have done that better. And that's that's it. That's my whole criticism of the entire show. I am just loving it. And it's so refreshing to go back and see something that you've seen before and put, a good number of years, 2-3 years on it, and go back and watch it again and go, oh.
Definitely holds up.
This is like putting on a comfortable pair of shoes that just, what's going to happen, but you're still enjoying the ride the entire way. I still care about the characters. I don't remember every single detail, so some things are a little surprising. So good. So if you haven't seen The Good Place, you should definitely
we both agree. I will say that recommend The Good Place.
That high definition and OLED and HDR and all of these things make it really hard to film stuff.
Yup.
My lord.
If anybody's wearing makeup, you're going to see the makeup.
You can totally see the makeup.
Yeah.
It is hilarious when it really comes through. You're like, oh. And then sometimes it looks great. Because I've seen Kristen Bell in like commercials and stuff like that. And she looks like a normal person. I mean, she's pretty, but she looks like a normal person. In this, for the most part, she's ageless. I mean, she could be, if you told me she was still in high school as Veronica Mars, I'd be like, yeah, I mean, probably. But in other times you're like, oh, she looks like a person of her age, which I don't even know what that is. But it's amazing how much they can do with makeup. It's also amazing how careful you have to be with your filming. So that becomes even more important. All right, this is AVRant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. Get your questions answered. All you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. Come to the website, find our show notes, our Flickr album, so you can follow along with our pictures, as well as the audio for all of our episodes, all the way back to episode 1, which was 913 episodes ago.
Yes.
Jesus. I mean, okay. So it's not 913 weeks ago.
No.
It's pretty close to that.
Pretty close.
For a while.
Yeah, because there was a couple you were doing twice a week, but then we've missed a few weeks here and there. So
you put it all together. Out. Yeah, it's pretty close to around 900 weeks ago. And that's a lot of weeks. I'm going to be honest with you.
Tom's having an existential crisis right here on the podcast, folks.
Yeah, we just had the episode. I just watched the episode where Ted Danzig character goes through his existential crisis after having to learn about the futility of existence. Yes, you find all our episodes. You can go to facebook.com/AVRant podcast, youtube.com/AVRant, where you can watch our live recording sessions. The pictures that are in the Flickr albums and that we will be talking about will also be shown on the screen.
Yes, they will.
Provided that any of this works.
That's right. Fingers still crossed. So far, so good. We'll see how long it goes.
Well, you can contact Rob directly, rob@avrant.com. His social media is @FirstReflect. I'm Tom at avrant.com. Thank our listeners of the week. To become a listener of the week, support the podcast in some way. One of the ways you can do that is go to avrant.com, click on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link, and send us a PayPal donation. We want to thank Tyler for doing that this week. Thank you very much, Tyler.
Very nice. We have ourselves a PayPal donation this week. Thank you, Tyler, for your financial support. We very much appreciate it.
It's so nice that when it has been a couple of weeks between PayPal donations, that when we get one, it is one. Not that if more people had done it, I would have been just as happy, or even maybe more so. But it's nice to have one name to list and not like, oh, no, we haven't listed anybody's name in 2 weeks. Here's 5 names.
Oh, okay.
At the same time. So it's
I don't mind either way.
Patreon.com, if you want to become a monthly contributor to the podcast, we have patreon.com/AVRant podcast. Every month they'll take some money from you and give most of it to us. with, I think, a minimum of $1. So we have 133 patrons right now, including Toke. Or Toke?
I think it's just Toke for that one. And yes, that is, once again, patreon.com/AVRant podcast if you'd like to sign up to make an automatic monthly donation. So big thanks to our 133 patrons. Toke, thank you for being one of them.
We also got some music gratitude for keeping the podcast going through all the stuff that's happening.
Yeah.
I stopped paying attention to the rap battle beef because it started being... It stopped being people throwing poetry at each other, and it started being like uncomfortably legal.
Oh yes,
there's gonna be problems.
Yeah.
Litigious. That's the word I was looking
I liked
for.
the Onion's take where they're just like Drake's new diss track, just asking Lamar out for was that the right name?
Lamar, yes. Yeah. Kendrick Lamar.
Yeah, Kendrick Lamar. Asking him out to lunch so they can hash this all out. I'm like, yep, that would be the best outcome. Thank you, The Onion.
I don't know. I think people keep putting out like AI diss tracks.
That's right.
Yeah, that are. I'm just like, okay, just stop.
Yep.
Just stop.
It's reached the beyond the point of ridiculousness.
Yes. I don't know. And then other people are dissing other people. I'm
sure.
like... And I told my wife this. I'm like, that whole thing was going on in the background for a very long time. And then for one weekend, it reached enough of a fever pitch that it reached into my white world.
Into mass media.
Grabbed me.
Regular news.
Turned my head towards it and say, pay attention. And I did. And I was like, whoa, this is really, really captivating. And then it started getting like... uncomfortable. I was like turning away.
Yep.
Okay, not that I don't care or whatever about people getting hurt or maybe fake shootings or something. I don't know what they're saying.
I have not been following it. I won't be any help.
But there's stuff going on, and people are thanking us for keeping the podcast going.
Yeah, that's not
managing
ridiculous.
to soldier through.
The notes of gratitude, they aren't ridiculous. We like those.
Carl Toke, who says we've helped him temper his eagerness to chase after things he doesn't actually need in his room and home theater system, while also helping him get the most out of what he already has. So we've earned his gratitude and his donation. And Bertrand, so that's Carl Toke and Bertrand. Thank you for thanking us.
That is right. Those names, once again, are Carl, Toke, and Bertrand. Thank you all very much for your notes of gratitude and encouragement. We definitely appreciate it. And a big thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions.
So we aren't in the news here. This is the news. We aren't really the podcast to tell you about the new iPad models that Apple announced last week. There are much better resources out there if you want to dig into all the details about their newest tablets. The only thing I know about them is that apparently the launch video thing that they showed was extremely tone deaf, and
yes,
people freaking hated it. They were very upset.
I saw it and I'm like, who? I mean, I get the concept they were going for, but the execution of that concept, right? The notion that all the things that people might create, music, artwork, sculptures, videos, games, all creative things, that those can all be compacted down into an iPad. I get that concept. But to do it by destroying those things in a hydraulic press...
Maybe not the best.
Not the best choice of metaphor.
I will tell you, I feel like between this and the Bumble thing that happened, or whatever, Hinge, one of those.
I think it was Hinge, yeah.
Whatever. One of those dating apps. There was two kind of like big missteps this week.
Oh yeah, Bumble was the AI one. That was good. Yeah, in case you don't know, the CEO of Bumble suggested that every person who signs up to Bumble should create an AI version of themselves on the service, and then they will have the AI versions converse with each other, and if they get along, they'll tell the two real life people that they ought to date each other.
I missed that completely. All I know, and I don't know this because I'm making it up, is I feel like instead of doing like market research, like people are just asking their like little cousin or sister or brother or somebody to look at something and give their opinion, and they look away from their phone, they glance at it, they go, it's all right. And they're like, okay.
Well, they are also apparently literally just watching Black Mirror episodes and going, yeah, that's a good idea. That's what we should do.
We should definitely do that.
They didn't call it Black Mirror to tell us that we're holding up a negative image mirror to what society might become as a warning. No. It's just a straight up good capitalist idea.
It's just capitalist. Anyways.
iPads.
Okay, the new iPad Pro models include a new screen design that might indicate an exciting advancement that could eventually make its way to TVs. The iPad Pro 11-inch and iPad Pro 13-inch that's too big. It's too big. Have you seen these Pro things? They've been out for a while.
It's been around before.
They're too big.
The 11-inch is a nice size. I like that size.
It's too big. They're all people cradle them like babies.
The 13 gets a little hefty.
The thing that stresses me out is I've never seen one with like a case on it. Never. They just walk around with these things like they're never going to drop them. I drop my phone 3 times a day. Have you lost your damn mind? I'm not. There's no world in which I take however much money this is, light it on fire, and throw it in my toilet, because that's what I'd be doing if I bought one of these.
They are also wafer thin now. As they have said, the thinnest electronic devices that Apple has ever created. In fact, when they first said them, they said the thinnest devices that Apple has ever created. Then people pointed out that they once made a cleaning cloth, and they also made the little device that you use to open up the SIM card tray. Those are thinner, but the thinnest electronic device that they've ever made. Yes.
Anyways, they use OLED screens. Apple's kind of late to the party on that front, but they're bringing something new to the table, and they've dubbed it Tandem OLED. Simply put, these are 2 emissive OLED layers stacked one directly in front of the other, and having 2 OLED layers means much higher light output than we've ever had from OLED displays before. Apple says 1000 nits full screen and 1600 nits 1600 nit peaks for HDR highlights. It's the 1000 nits full screen that's really new, but along with the higher light output, using 2 OLED layers means better longevity. Better longevity?
Yes.
Better longevity.
Longevity for the screens themselves. Yeah.
I see. And less chance of burn-in, as the vast majority of the time, each of the 2 OLED layers can essentially be driven at half the normal brightness of a single layer. It's obvious to extrapolate how this might turn into an exciting advancement for large screen OLED TVs at some point. The larger 13-inch screens are exclusively being manufactured by LG Display, while the smaller 11-inch screens are being manufactured by both LG Display and Samsung Display. Reportedly, Samsung Display is experiencing some manufacturing difficulties with the new Tandem OLED stack, so analysts have warned to expect supply constraints for the 11-inch iPad Pro model. Couldn't give me one. If you gave me one, I'd leave it in the box and I'd sell it immediately. Not taking it out of the box. Couldn't give me one. I would break it the same day.
Okay.
I don't even think I could get it from the box to the charger cable that I had plugged in across the room for it. No chance.
Yes. So overall, though, I think this is an interesting advancement. This is not a brand new idea. The notion of having 2 layers in a display in order to increase contrast.
Yeah, LCD has tons of layers in display. So
yes, but I mean, the actual full-on dual color layer that's going on there. Not a brand new idea, but this is something we haven't seen from consumer OLED displays yet. This is sort of the first one out there. Looks very promising. So I mean, the thing is, if you actually zoom in with a microscope and see the sub-pixel structure of micro LED or OLED displays, there's actually a lot of space in there. There are these tiny little light sources that are in there, and then there's a remarkable amount of space around those subpixels, which is how you're able to have a second layer behind it shining its light through those gaps. But it does mean, necessarily that those gaps have to actually be transmissive. Apparently what's going on with Samsung Display is they're having some light reflectance from the lower layer bouncing its light off the back of the upper layer, and that's leading to a desaturation of the contrast and color and some light leakage, so you're not getting the perfectly inky OLED black levels that you would be expecting. So yeah, you can see how a manufacturing challenge like that would happen. We've seen that LG is actually releasing a transparent OLED display in a full-size TV, so some of that technological know-how might be a part of this as well, allowing for that second layer to be behind the first layer coming through. So all of that, like I say, pretty obvious to see how that could be applied to televisions at some point. Not necessarily expecting it next year, but if the technology exists at the 11-inch and 13-inch sizes, the notion of scaling that up at some point to 55-inch larger sizes, I certainly think that has to be on the roadmap. But yeah, given all of that, even though the prices of those iPad Pros is high, shockingly high, especially once you start adding on a keyboard or anything like that, I'm kind of impressed that the prices wasn't considerably more, like double what the old one was, because you've doubled the screens. So I'm pretty impressed by that. I think this is interesting. 1,000 nits full screen. That's even LCDs struggle to do that. So yeah, gonna be cool.
Could be. Just imagine. My wife is already. So let me ask you a question.
Okay,
Rob. This is aside.
Yes.
This is for my own personal benefit.
Gotcha.
How much do you think a normal person spends on a TV?
On a TV?
Just a TV. Just if they're going to buy a TV, what do you think the median price is of a TV?
Ooh.
Mean. You know what I mean? If you took all the TVs that people bought, where do you think that price is?
I'm going to go with about $600.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'm just curious.
Okay.
I feel like that's about right.
Okay.
All right. That's for my wife. It has nothing to do with you. It just made me think of it. So
okay.
All right. Hisense announced a couple of...
For that?
No context. Right. That's it.
Leaving it out there.
Hey,
folks.
Anybody else who wants to chime in,
okay.
Just put it in the comments someplace. Below not the video, because we're never going to see that. But if you go to the website, you can leave it in the comments there. I think that comments are turned back on.
No, the people can't leave, or can they? They can't register if they're not already signed up to the AVRant website. There's no registering to do so. And
question at AVRant.com. Send it there.
Oh God, it's gonna be a flood.
Rob will tabulate
a flood of just numbers.
Just numbers. No context to it. Don't even put a dollar sign in front of it. Just a number in the subject line.
Just what we need.
Hisense announced a couple of new TV models. First up, they're straight up coming for Samsung's popular The Frame TV. They're introducing their new, much less expensive Hisense CanvasTV. Holy crap, dude. It's a rap beat between Hisense and Samsung. They're gonna start releasing, TVs that have the exact same model number, but one off.
Right.
Just one a little higher, just to piss each other off. Anyway, Samsung's The Frame, which, by the way, is a terrible TV. Can we just...
It's not a good TV, indeed.
No, it's a good... It's not a TV you buy because you wanted a good TV.
No.
It's a TV you buy because you wanted everything else it does instead of being a TV.
And it's super popular because Samsung is not wrong that most of the time, for most people, the TV is off.
That's right.
Right? If you actually looked at hours of time on an average day from an average person that the TV is on versus off, it is off most of the time. So let's make it look really good when it's off. And who cares about what it looks like when it's on? Because people who buy the Frame TV don't really want a TV anyway, but they begrudgingly accept it as long as it looks like a piece of artwork with a fancy-looking frame when it's hanging on the wall. So given how popular the Frame has been and given how not good the TV needed to be, Hisense is like, we can do that for less money.
We can make a bad TV too.
That's right.
In fact, we're great at making bad TVs. We might be the best. We're way better than Samsung.
Could be.
All right, well, Samsung's The Frame costs a hefty $1,500 for the 55-inch and $2,000 for the 65-inch, all in their low contrast, low brightness, edge-lit glory.
Mm-hmm.
Hisense has priced their Canvas TV 55 and 65-inch models at $1,000 and $1,300 respectively, which means you can get a 65-inch Canvas TV for less than the 55-inch Frame TV.
You can see where the thinking is going from Hisense.
Just like the Frame, Canvas TV TVs have a fully matte finish on the screen surface and interchangeable bezels, available in different colors. The different bezels snap on with magnets. It comes preloaded with a curated collection of artwork to be displayed when the TV is quote-unquote off.
Mm-hmm.
And you can pay to download more. You can show your own photos. Unlike the Frame, Canvas TV might actually be a half-decent television. It uses quantum dots and supports 4K at 144 Hz. With VRR, via its HDMI 2.1 inputs, it's scheduled to go on sale this summer. So,
I mean, honestly...
Don't buy it, really.
Nah, but I kind of predict this is going to be a smashing success for Hisense.
I bet I could convince my parents to buy this in a second.
Yeah, because there are so many people who have seen the Frame, want the Frame, but go, ooh, that's kind of expensive. So, I mean, if you can, if you're a dealer or any kind of retailer and you go, oh, that's what you want, but you just want the price to be lower, well, here's this one. And it's like, honestly, I don't think, I mean, obviously we haven't seen this yet in person. No. We haven't seen actual technical reviews of it yet, but I am predicting that the TV part of the Hisense CanvasTV is probably going to be better than the Frame.
Well, I don't know that it can be that much worse.
Don't know that it can be that much worse. So
it could be equally bad or bad in different ways, but I think it's got to be at least as good as the
right.
frame.
I think this could be a smashing success. Although, like you alluded to about this being just like a rap battle, it wouldn't surprise me if there is some lawsuits going on once this thing hits the market.
I don't see how they could possibly win that.
I don't
think so. I mean, I don't. Yeah. What are you going to do? Sue somebody else for making a TV? Everybody makes TVs. Yeah. And you made one that's thin. Everybody makes one that's thin. You made one that can show pictures on the screen. My LG does that. What are you talking about? And second, at the top of their lineup, Hisense has announced the new U9N series. It's subtitled "Suck It, Samsung." A new series, the Samsung Sucks series of TVs. Only losers buy Samsungs. Hisense taking shots.
They are.
Only available in 75 and 85-inch sizes. That sits between the former normal consumer flagships U8N series and the luxury UX series, which only comes in massive 98 and 110-inch models this year. While the U8N series claimed roughly double the number of local dimming zones over last year's U8K series. Hisense. Just make it say Samsung sucks, and I'd say that over and over again without a single complaint. But this U number, another letter, is killing me.
Well, I mean, having a 6 series, a 7 series, an 8 series, a 9 series, an
that's
X
fine.
Series, that's not so bad. They put the U at the front because Hisense calls their things ULED. Instead of QLED or OLED, they have to be ULED, so there's a U at the beginning, and then the letter at the end just ticks down along with the calendar. Although how we jumped from K to N, I'm not exactly sure, but yeah, we're N for 2024.
It's the first names of somebody's kids in that corporation. I'm telling you. All right, the U8N series claimed roughly double the number of local dimming zones over last year's U8K series and around 2,500 nits of peak light output. The U9N series doubles all of that to around 5,000 zones of local dimming and 5,000 nits of peak light output. For Hisense, the U9N prices aren't cheap, but when you put them up against the flagship models from other brands, they aren't that bad either. $3,000 for the 75-inch, $4,000 for the 85-inch, and they're scheduled to be available this summer. So there you go. Or just buy OLED. Tell them to suck it.
Although, OLED ain't hitting 5,000 nits. Even if we get to dual-layer OLEDs, they're not going to be hitting 5,000 nits. So, I mean, that is clearly what they're going for.
I just can't imagine anybody being in a room with an OLED and going, boy, I wish this was brighter. Like, when I first got this TV, I was like, Jesus.
Well, yes, compared to your projector.
It is so bright. Like, my kids, being the dramatic little farts that they are, they're like, I got a headache because the TV's too bright. I'm like, get out. Get out of my home theater. You're not allowed back in here for a day.
You can dial that down. There is a way to dial down.
Not gonna. I pay all the money for freaking OLED not to have it sear my retinas. I certainly don't want 5,000 nits in here because that feels like when you switch scenes in Dune, it's really going to be bad.
Well, that UX series, that luxury UX series, and its 98-inch and 110-inch sizes, that's the one where they're like, yeah, you can hit 10,000 nit peaks. They're like, tone mapping, never heard of it. We ain't going to do it. It's just showing it level for level. So, yeah, they did it. They got there. Congrats to Hisense. But yeah, I wasn't really expecting a U9N series, but I guess they always left themselves that wiggle room because they had the U8, they had the UX. They're like, well, we got to shimmy something in there, and it's got to fit right in between. If one is 2,500 and up at the top it's 10,000, 5,000 right in the middle, we're just going to do it.
Where's the 7,500, baby?
That's right.
All right, Disney and Warner Brothers Discovery announced they are teaming up to offer a new streaming bundle starting this summer. The bundle will include Disney Plus, Hulu Max, all for a single price, which has not been announced. There will be an ad-free plan and a less expensive ad-supported plan. It isn't totally clear yet, but it does not appear that Max will actually show up as a new tab within the Disney Plus app, the way Hulu has now been incorporated, nor will Disney Plus or Hulu content show up within the Max app. Each service still has their own separate websites and apps, but you'll be able to sign up for the new bundle from any of them and pay a single price for all three services. Warner Brothers already announced that they're going to cancel The Mandalorian because of tax reasons.
Good luck with that, but yeah.
David Salsoff says that nobody really likes that little Yoda guy anyways. It's weird. So he's going to cancel.
I mean, although if Bob Iger announced that they are just taking some of those Disney Plus series that they announced and they're just being put on the shelf never to see the light of day, that wouldn't shock me at this point. You know, if Agatha All Along just never comes out, wouldn't shock me.
There's a couple of series that they were announcing. I was like, really?
Yeah, Ironheart.
I mean, hey,
I don't know if Ironheart's going to make it.
Yeah, I don't know. After Guardians of the Galaxy, you have to have some sort of faith that if it's good, they will put it out, because Guardian of the Galaxy's happened and nobody asked for it. There was nobody said we should make a Guardian. Why aren't they making Guardians of the Galaxy? I mean, there's a lot of things.
Iron Man and Hulk, which were quite well known. It wasn't the immediate leap to go to Guardians of the Galaxy. Yes, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Reps from both companies said they hope the increased choice and value will drive subscriber growth and result in a much stronger retention. It sounds a lot like they're just trying to put cable back together one service at a time, as far as I'm concerned.
I mean, it all started because Netflix was out there transitioning from discs by mail to streaming online. It got very, very popular at the time. They were licensing content from all the studios. And then the studio heads all said, wait a second, Netflix is making money with our content. Clearly, the only reason anybody is paying for Netflix is our studio's content.
Our particular content.
Has nothing to do with any of the other studios' contents or having a convenient single stop for all the content. That's not what's appealing. It was our shows and our shows alone. So we should keep all of that money for ourselves. We'll all split off, spend billions of dollars, create our own streaming services. And it turns out what people actually wanted was to go to one place for one price and have all the content. And we're just little by little coming back there, but at a much higher conglomerate price than we ever had before. Hooray, we did it.
Comments from our listeners. James heard Bertrand asking which Dolby Cinema location he should visit when he's in Los Angeles next month, and he wanted to weigh in with some thoughts. James was thinking that if Bertrand wants the most memorable theater go to experience, then he ought to visit the El Capitan Theater on Hollywood Boulevard. I've been there.
I'm sure you have.
Isn't that the one that is the Disney one? I thought so. Anyways, technically speaking, it's not a Dolby Cinema, and it does not conform to that design due to retaining its historical aesthetics, but it has been fully updated to include both Dolby Atmos audio and Dolby Vision, so as far as equipment goes, it's on par with the Dolby Cinema. And if he's already in the neighborhood, why not pop across the street to TCL Chinese Theater, as I suggested. It's now a digital. I guess that's not the same one, because I know that the one I'm thinking of is not near the Chinese Theater.
Okay.
It's now a digital IMAX theater with 1.89 to 1 screen and stadium seating that was made possible by digging down into the basement of the original theater and making that part of the main auditorium. And since it was rescued by that large group of Hollywood directors, James thinks it would be well worth the visit to the Village Theater in Westwood Village. They still proudly display their THX Ultimate Cinema certification. As far as James can remember, it's the only one around that still plays the classic THX Deep Note intro before every movie. No Dolby Vision, but it does have Dolby Atmos. There you go. There's some suggestions. Some
fun ideas. I mean, when Bertrand wrote into us about that, he was like specifically about the thing we do not have anywhere in Canada is a Dolby Cinema, according to Dolby's reference cinema specifications. So that's a specific thing that he wanted to check out. And so that was the response that I gave. I'm like, yeah, these are the ones that are right up to Dolby's own reference cinema specs. So I didn't actually know that about the El Capitan. I didn't know that they have Dolby Vision there. So that's kind of interesting because, clearly the interior doesn't look anything like the reference spec that Dolby has for their own Dolby cinemas that are branded as such. But very cool that they have Dolby Vision there at the El Capitan. That would be worth checking out because, I mean, it is a very historic, well-known theater. And if you're in the area, I do agree. I would check that out for sure.
Questions. Mike. A long time ago, Mike says he found out. I'm sorry, let me try this again. A long time ago, Mike says he found Kurt Palme's.
I don't actually know how to pronounce that last name. Palme? I would say Palme.
Whatever. Calibration for Dummies online. They used it to purchase an i1 display calorimeter, download the HCFR calibration software, and performed his own calibration on his LCTV for about the same price as a one-time professional calibration. He was happy with his choice. He recently bought an Optima UHZ 50 DLP projector. It uses a laser light source. He has always read that it's best to run any display for around 200 hours before doing a full calibration. But does that remain the case with laser-driven projectors? If so, how long should he wait before doing his own calibration? I don't know. I don't know about lasers.
Yeah.
I don't know.
They clearly do not dim anywhere near as quickly as lamp-based. They are all spec'd to last about 20,000 hours, but that is 20,000 hours to their half-life, to their half-brightness. So they do dim over time, but just much more slowly, about 10 times more slowly than our typical lamp-based sources. Now, I mean, I poked around, and there does seem to be sort of like a rule of thumb that, most of the forum quote-unquote experts and I mean, actually ISF certified calibrators and that, so people with some credentials at least on this, the rule of thumb seems to be maybe don't do a full-on professional calibration like literally the first time you turn it on, because there does seem to be a little bit of settling of that laser light source, that it is on very first turn on bright enough that there is a slightly noticeable dimming after a short amount of time. But the numbers that I saw thrown out there were anywhere from 20 to 50 hours. Nobody was suggesting 200 or even 100 hours like has been pretty common with lamp-based projectors. Everybody was saying less time than that, but most were saying, 20, 30 hours, something like that. Basically run it for about a day, and continuous, like around 24 hours. And then it should be, very settled to the point that it'll be exceedingly difficult in a long time to notice any dimming of that laser light source. I don't know if that is objectively true, if it really is that, but that's not exactly a particularly difficult rule of thumb to follow if you were to hire a professional or just spend the time to do it yourself. So I think that's pretty reasonable. Run it for a little while and then do it. It couldn't hurt anything. I don't think that you're really asking too much to wait that amount of time. I wanted to talk a little bit about, what you might choose for doing your own calibration at home. There's nothing particularly wrong with using the software and the i1 display, going back a ways, but those original i1 displays colorimeters for a projector. Because even though the colorimeter that you purchased back then for your LCD TV, as we say, a long time ago, however long that actually was, and that HDFR software, which you can download for free, I believe, they really aren't set up for HDR. That is the thing that's lacking there. But you aren't getting more than 150 nits reflecting off of your screen from a projection setup like this anyway, and that i1 display is absolutely capable of dealing with that type of light output level. It would be a little bit interesting, because a lot of times you don't actually have that much separate calibration control over the HDR mode of display versus the SDR. Many displays, you calibrate the SDR mode, and then there's like an internal lookup table inside the display that converts those settings to HDR, and you don't really have a full set of truly completely separate color settings for HDR. Everything is derived off of the SDR calibration that you do. So even if you basically just do an SDR calibration using the software and the meter that you already have, particularly for a projector where we know it's not going to be getting to 1,000 nit brightness or anywhere close to that, where the meter itself might not be accurate anymore, it shouldn't be any issue. I think you're in good stead for doing that. That said, for somebody who were coming at this brand new and wanted to be able to confirm that HDR as well as SDR is being accurate, plus the fact that colorimeters, unless you are, on a somewhat regular basis, having them sort of reprofiled against a known accurate meter, they can experience some drift over time. The i1 meters were pretty darn good. The i1 meters, I wouldn't be scared that they've drifted severely over a long period of time, unless they were exposed to really weird heating and humidity conditions or something like that. But that all said, if you want the most accurate, having a display that's been recently profiled or known profiled to a good meter, and then having the most current, CalMan software, which is definitely sort of the standard these days. It's not unreasonable, to look at those bundles that Portrait Displays is offering to get one of their C6 meters that they profile before they send it to you. Really, really accurate for a wide range of displays, including laser displays, right up to date with OLED displays and things like that, which some of the older meters weren't. they didn't necessarily give you completely accurate readings from some of the newer display technologies. So it could be a thing to consider if you're willing to invest that type of money. But honestly, Mike, I think you're good to go with what you have for doing your projector.
All right. Sorry. I was scrolling.
I'm sure.
Shawn has been on the hunt for some new gaming headphones. He's tried a few at this point, and it sure seems as though anything marketed specifically at gamers just has crazy boosted bass or crazy boosted treble or both.
Yep.
And all they do is sound awful and give him a headache. So his max budget is $250. Although spending less than that would be great. He'd like us to recommend both a wired and wireless option for him to consider. What do we suggest? Wireless options. So for gaming, would that be Bluetooth? I don't think that's what you would want to do.
Xbox, if you are using it with an Xbox, they have their own like semi-proprietary Xbox wireless protocol that the headphones have to be specifically meant to work with that protocol. PlayStation 5, PlayStation 4, and your PC, they can use, just open standards, or if it comes with a USB dongle, that'll work. So yeah, there definitely are wireless standards. Of course, we're worried about latency, so usually you want the ones that come with a USB dongle, because then they'll be using radio frequency transmission with very, very low latency, and you're not relying on Bluetooth. Yeah.
Because Bluetooth, unfortunately, I mean, the latency is just built in. It's just part of it. You can only get it to be so good.
Yeah.
And I wrote an article about that. The idea is you would love it to be, like Rob said, you want a proprietary solution, because then over RF, it's going to be much lower latency. The problem is that honestly, Bluetooth headphones, the headphones that I review, it's insane. Like Andrew's discovering this because I keep sending him headphones to review. Andrew's discovering this. He goes, I can't believe how good these, and then fill in the double-digit number with a $sign in front of it, headphones sound.
Yeah.
I can't believe how good they sound. The question is, why do gaming headphones sound so bad?
That's what makes it annoying. It's not that price precludes the ability to make some decent sounding headphones. It is all just about the marketing. For whatever reason, everyone has decided that all gamers want is a crazy V-notch shape EQ curve.
It's nuts.
It's absolutely nuts. But I'm right there with you, Shawn. I had the exact same experience when I was looking, because there is a little bit of a difference here, which is that we aren't just looking for headphones. We are typically looking for a headset that does include a microphone so that we can do our online chat while we're online gaming, or at least has that capability. And so if you're looking for a gaming headset, I don't know why, but it absolutely is the case. I'm right there with you that the vast, vast, vast majority of the headphones that are out there that have that setup and that marketing, they just sound like utter crap. So what I ended up doing for myself, because I went through a bunch of them, I ended up going with a wired solution.
Yeah.
I went with a combination of, it's sold through Drop, but it's made by Sennheiser, and that is their PC38X gaming headset. Goes for $170, so it is within the budget that you specified. But this is a wired solution. This is not wireless in any way. It is based on their HD 500 series of open back wired headphones that Sennheiser makes, which are definitely amongst my favorite over-ear open back headphones. The sound quality is very, very nice. The comfort is excellent. That's one of the other main reasons that I chose to go with the PC38X, is that the comfort of them for wearing them for a long time is excellent. But we do, of course, have to be aware that it's open back. So if you're sitting right next to somebody and they don't want to hear a peep out of those headphones, it won't do that. They are open back. Sound comes out of them. And if you want really, really good sound isolation from noises outside of you, it's not going to provide that either. The backs are open. You can hear sounds outside of you. Muffled, of course, but you can hear sounds outside of you. I think it's a completely viable solution for console gaming, because both of the current gen consoles that we have, the controllers have headphone jacks built right into them. So it's not that you even need to run a long headphone cable to some other device with a headphone jack. You can plug them right into the headphone jack that's right there in the controller that you're holding, and that is giving you a wireless, low latency connection between the console and the controller, and then the controller is just powering the headphones, and it does an absolutely perfectly fine job with it. And of course, it's compatible with both Xbox and PlayStation that way, because it's just a regular 3.5 millimeter jack, and Drop and Sennheiser knew that, so they include a short 3.5 millimeter cable in there
that's going to sitting all over the thing, and every time you move, you pull it out.
Drops down into your handheld controller very, very nicely. And of course, you can use it with a PC setup as well. They do include in the box a long length cable that separates out the mic jack and the headphone jack, so you can plug it into any PC that has that setup. So I think that's a good solution. It fits the price. It has good sound quality. I will say one negative thing about them, though, which is that they went for extended bass response, and it has it. You can measure it and you can hear it, that it has extended bass response, but they can be overdriven. I have quite easily had the volume up loud enough that I have heard some, if it's not downright clipping, it's definitely audible distortion in the deep bass. They can get a little flappy. They can get a little fluttery. Now, I had the first generation version of the PC38X, and they are now on a second generation. And by reports, they have tightened that up a little bit. It was a common complaint. So I have pretty good confidence, because Sennheiser knows how to make some headphones. So I have some pretty good confidence that if you're buying the current version, you probably won't have exactly the same experience that I had with the first gen version. And they're easy to tell apart because the first gen version had like a yellow coloring on the head caps, and the new ones are just all black. So I feel pretty good about making that recommendation. Now, if you do want to go with something a little bit less expensive than that, Sennheiser sells something that looks almost exactly the same, but it's just the Sennheiser branding. There's no drop branding, and it's the EPOS 1 Gaming 1 headphones that they sell for $130. They look almost identical. They fit and sound almost identical, but the sound signature is closer to like the 555 HD headphones, which has rolled off bass for sure. They've gone for less bass extension with the EPOS Game 1 headphones directly from Sennheiser, but the price is lower. And if you're like, yeah, I'd actually rather have no risk of any of that bass bottoming out, like I've experienced on the first gen version of the PC38X, then the Sennheiser EPOS Game 1 could be a consideration. So then going over to some wireless headphones. Now I'm going to start by immediately going over the budget that you specified, because if you want a gaming wireless headset that actually sounds really, really good, then I'm going to talk about Audeze Maxwell wireless gaming headset. These are planar magnetic, and they sell for $330. So we've blown
much for $250.
Blown past $250 really quickly. But if you want ones that are just like linear response, these are closed back. They do a good job of blocking out external sound. Nobody will hear what you're hearing inside, and the sound quality is really good. And they didn't go for a V-notch. They went for very linear, tell it like it is response. And of course, really, really good transient response on those planar magnetics. Some of the best sound quality you can get, but you are paying for it. A good microphone on them as well. If you don't have an Xbox and you don't need an Xbox and you're never going to have an Xbox, there is a less expensive version for $300, a $30 discount, that does not support the Xbox wireless protocol and will only work on PlayStations and PCs. So you could save yourself a little bit of money there if you're not an Xbox gamer, but it's still $50 over your budget. But I do highly recommend them. So lastly, I'll say ones that are not too expensive, $130, just like this Sennheiser EPOS Game 1s. And I guess I would say about these ones, they're not bad.
What a glowing endorsement.
And yeah, those are the HyperX Cloud 3 wireless gaming headphones. They are very, very popular. They at least, don't sound awful like most other gaming headphones do. I don't think they sound great. They still aren't linear. They still aren't completely tell like it is, but they aren't like offensively bad like all the other gaming headphones are. I'd be perfectly fine. Like if somebody said, this was the price I had $150 to spend. I wanted to spend less than that. I wanted wireless for sure. So I went with the HyperX Cloud 3. I'd be like, that's a good choice. The microphone, not great. Not a great microphone. People will be able to hear what you're saying, but it's not great. So I'm not over the moon about these, but if price is more important, then I wouldn't be angry at getting them.
I will say, if you're thinking about Bluetooth low latency thinking, okay, well, maybe that's the solution that Tom and Rob haven't addressed. The Bluetooth site or whatever, the group, that if you go and look at the specs, low latency, 40 milliseconds. That's about their approximate. Right. Yeah. That's what low latency means, which is like approximately.
Good enough that if you're watching TV, you're not going to notice a lip sync issue, which you notice on regular Bluetooth that doesn't have the low latency. It's long enough that you notice a lip sync problem. So yeah, low latency solves that. But if you're a high-end gamer who's like, I've got to hear those footsteps and those gunshots immediately, it's still a little bit slow.
It's too slow. Yeah. That's right. So just so you know, and they do say about. I'm not, it's not me adding that. Yeah. They're saying about, which means that maybe it's a little faster sometimes, but maybe it's a little slower at times. Whatever it is, it's not consistent. So that's not what you want. So that's why we don't suggest Bluetooth.
Yeah. Honestly, value, quality, comfort, I would get the wireless ones. I'd either get the drop PC38Xs or I'd get the Sennheiser EPOS Game one. That's my honest recommendation. It's not that bad to use them, especially if you're using a current console.
The wired ones. You
mean? The wired ones.
Yeah. Wired ones, okay. I thought you said wireless. I might have misheard you. Chris. Last week, Chris wrote us about having replaced his old Sharp TV with a new Hisense U7K, and now he's having HDMI-CEC issues with his Sharp TV. He was able to use the TV's remote to turn the system on and turn the system off with his Denon X3400H powering on and off along with the Sharp. But now his Denon will power on along with his Hisense TV, but it won't power off. So we went through some settings in his Denon and his Hisense, and success with his Hisense set to device auto power off in its channels and input settings menu. The Denon receiver now powers on and off when using the Hisense TV remote. But there was a wrinkle. Yeah. He also has a Roku Ultra, and he uses the Roku remote whenever he uses that device. Similar thing, the TV and receiver both power on when using the Roku remote, but the Denon doesn't power off. The TV goes into standby when powering things off using the Roku remote, but this Denon stays on. Again, it's all working perfectly fine. When he had his old Sharp TV, and that was the only device he changed. So what could have happened in the settings of either his Roku Ultra or his Denon X3400H to make it this way? First of all, Roku never turns off. It's always, unless it's different than mine, it's always on.
But they do have a power button for the TV.
They do.
They know that people don't want to have to pick up a separate remote just to turn their TV's power off. So that is there. With the Roku Ultra, it is the Roku Voice Remote Pro that comes along with it, their highest end remote. But it is a little bit weird the way Roku does things. They don't make it explicit whether the Roku device itself actually sends CEC commands or not. It kind of seems like it doesn't. Because what they do make explicit is that they've really only designed the Roku remote to control a television. They explicitly say, we really don't control a sound bar or an AV receiver. We just control a television. That's all that they envisioned, and that's all that they prepared for. Right. So they explain in their own support settings what they actually recommend you do, even if you are using an AV receiver or a soundbar and you are plugging the Roku Ultra into the HDMI input of that receiver or soundbar, not directly in the TV. What they recommend doing is start by plugging the Roku directly into the TV just to do the remote control setup side of things. That is their straight up recommendation. Because typically when you do that, it will detect the television through HDMI and it will automatically set up the Roku remote to be ready to control that television. And then they're like, rely on the television's CEC commands from the TV to the AV receiver or soundbar to send something like the power off command. So, if you're saying, hey, what changed when I changed my TV? That's what changed. The Roku used to know how to control your Sharp TV. Now, the commands, I guess, are generic enough that it manages to turn off your new Hisense TV. But if it wasn't set up for this control scheme, then that's clearly the issue. So, to do it manually, you're pressing that home button on your Roku remote. You're going to the Roku settings. This is all on your Roku Ultra. Going to remotes and devices, selecting the remote, and then you will set up remote for TV control because there is no option for setting it up for soundbar or AV receiver control. That'll set you through the process of detecting what television you have. If it doesn't work, there's a whole manual way that you can do it too. So we're having those on screen, or you can see the images of the instructions. If you come to the Flickr album, I've got those up there as well. But once that is set up, then they're like, you're relying on that HDMI-CEC command now getting from the television to the AV receiver to support all of that, which we've now confirmed is working, right? When you use the TV's own remote, now it is turning off the AV receiver. So this should be possible. It should technically work, but yeah, it's weirder than you would expect it to be from a device like a Roku, which is simple to set up in all the other ways, but in this case, they kind of tried to oversimplify it by being like, yeah, we only control TVs. That's all we do with our remotes.
That's so convenient.
I know, right?
I think HDMI is the best.
Plug and play, Tom. Plug and play.
It really has made my life so much easier. Chris had a second question last week regarding his new 27-inch LG Ultra Gear OLED computer monitor with native 1440p resolution. He had it connected via HDMI to a Denon X1300W receiver with his Apple TV 4K plugged into the Denon. He was no longer seeing the Denon's on-screen display, and he wants that so he can easily see the Denon's volume level when he changes it. I agree.
Yeah.
We said the Denon would only be able to use its on-screen display when passing through a 1080p SDR signal, and that does seem to be the case. But the whole reason he got the new 27-inch OLED monitor was to have the OLED's inky black levels and HDR support, so locking this Apple TV 4K into 1080p SDR output obviously defeats the purpose. Is getting a new AV receiver the only solution? With the Denon X1600H or Onkyo TX-NR7100 do the trick? I mean, it almost certainly would, honestly.
Yeah, so I mean, it does have to be an AV receiver that, like, I still don't know how many of them natively support 1440p. Right, a lot of them will at least support 4K now. You know, unlike the X1300W, which was like, yeah, if your resolution going through is 4K and not 1080p, we're not going to put the on-screen display. They will do 4K now. Most of them have 4K menus. The Onkyo definitely does. 1600, is that old enough that they still didn't have 4K on-screen displays? Because Denon took a long time before they got to 4K on-screen displays. It might not have been until.
I mean, he's got a 1300 right now, right?
Oh, yeah,
so it's got to be, I always assumed it would be better enough from 3 generations.
So I just know Denon and Marantz, they dragged their feet on getting 4K support for their on-screen displays. It was a long time. I think the 1600 was just new enough to do it. I don't think the 1500 had it. But, you know, we're on to the 1800 now, so it might be something like the 1700 definitely did. 1600, in my mind, I'm questioning whether that actually had 4K resolution support. And similar thing for...
It says it has 4K Ultra HD pass-through with HDR10. Dolby, yeah.
Yeah, that's pass-through, though. That doesn't necessarily mean on-screen display gets overlaid on that one. So it might be needing to go up to 1700. The TX-NR7100 from Onkyo definitely does that. Had full 4K and HDR on-screen display support. So that one I know off the top of my head. But yeah, basically, for what you're asking, the simple answer is yes. About the only way you're going to actually make this working is upgrading the AV receiver, because like you can't split the audio and video from the Apple TV 4K, because then you're clearly not getting an on-screen display from the Denon, right? So that doesn't solve the issue. You have to be passing the Apple TV 4K through your AV receiver to get the receiver's on-screen display. So there's no way of like updating the X1300W to do it.
It says GUI overlay on HDMI, but it doesn't specify that it's 4K.
That it's 4K and
HDR.
No,
it says it right here.
Okay.
4K signal pass-through /scaling /GUI overlay.
Okay.
Yes, no, yes. So 4K pass-through, yes. Scaling, no.
Okay.
GUI overlay, yes.
GUI overlay. Okay, so 1600 did it.
So 1600 will do it.
I'm pretty darn sure it took Intel then to get there, where other brands were doing it before. So okay, so that should work. But yes, you will have to buy a new AV receiver to keep it. I mean, that's such a small feature to spend so much money to get it, but when it's really important to you, I mean, unfortunately, I don't know any other way to do it, right? It's just the 1300W just isn't going to pass it through.
I mean, if you get it for accessories for less.
That's right.
I mean, you can.
I'm sure that's where he's looking. That's why he's like, oh, those two are within my price range. Maybe one of those. Yeah.
So one other issue with this monitor setup, when he first hooked everything up, the Apple TV 4K was sending out everything HDR. He did not like how that looked. He found the match content setting and turned on to match dynamic range. That seemed to fix the issue in the sense that the monitor now switched between SDR and HDR appropriately. But whenever it's in SDR mode, black is no longer inky black. It looks gray.
Tom knows about this.
I know, I know. And just as bad as his old LCD monitor. Again, the whole point of buying this new monitor was to get OLED black levels. Is that just the way SDR looks now, or is there something he's missing? Is something you're missing? And first of all, if I assume that you did not say yes to the Dolby Vision thing at the beginning, because
I don't think that
hoses everything up.
I also don't think that particular monitor supports Dolby Vision, so it wouldn't have been that. But yes, certainly when it the Apple TV 4K just auto detects what display you have, it definitely sets itself to native output is going to be, in this case, 1440p HDR output. That's what it's going to set as its just native output, and unless you turn on match dynamic range, then it isn't going to switch between SDR and HDR. Now, you actually do have the option of leaving the default output as 1440p HDR, and if you do turn on match dynamic range within that match content setting in the Apple TV 4K, it will switch itself to standard dynamic range when it's standard dynamic range video that's playing. But the menu, the Apple TV 4K's own menu, will stay in HDR if you leave it at that default setting, whereas it's the reverse, right? If you set the default output of the Apple TV 4K to 1440p standard dynamic range, SDR, then the menu will be in SDR, and it'll only go into HDR output when the video is HDR. So you have your choice there. You're basically just selecting what the menu comes out as. But yeah, SDR definitely does not have to look like it has elevated black levels. What's going on there, and this is not particularly a surprise because you've connected it to a computer monitor, this is that limited range in the black level versus the full range. This is the, if we're talking 8-bit values, the range from absolute black in the full range goes from 0 up to 255 for maximum white, whereas video signals use the limited range where black is at a signal value of 16, and everything below black from 0 to 15, that is below black content in a video signal. So what's going on here is your Apple TV 4K is putting out the limited range, the video range signal, where black starts at a signal value of 16, but your PC monitor is expecting that black is down at 0. So it's okay, I'm getting 16, I'm going to show you a shade of gray, and that's what ends up coming out of there. So there's a couple of different ways to come at this, but I'm going to tell you the way that I think you should do it because you're using your Apple TV 4K to show streaming video content. There is a setting right in the video settings of the Apple TV 4K that lets you choose between 444 chroma output or 420 chroma output. There's also a choice between YCBCR and RGB. So the thing is, with a computer monitor, you probably could set the Apple TV 4K to RGB instead of YCBCR, and that should fix the issue, because that is now sending out the full 0 to 255, exactly like a PC monitor is expecting. But the alternative is, if you leave the Apple TV 4K at its default, which is YCBCR output, you actually want to have it sending out 420, which you're hey, there's a higher value. It even set itself automatically to the 444 higher value, but video content is coming in that chroma subsampled limited black range where 16 is black instead of 0, and setting it to 420 fixes that problem when you connect it to a monitor that's expecting the 0 to 255 range. So kind of two ways of fixing it there, either setting it to RGB instead of YCBCR, or leaving it at YCBCR but setting it to 420 instead of 444. And that should absolutely fix this issue.
It seems remarkable to me that we have these devices that are clearly meant to do a thing, and then you have to go into a labyrinth of menus to make them do that thing.
Well, I mean, Apple tried to help you by just picking actually the highest output and locking it there. They're it's going to be 1440p HDR at 60 frames per second all the time, no matter what the original signal was. We're just going to lock it there, and that will be technically correct. It's just that all your menus are in HDR and it's blinding and it's weird looking. So, yeah.
Dazz. In Dazz's basement, there's a storage space that also has the house's electrical panel in it. There is finished drywall in the walls, but the floor is just concrete foundation and the ceiling is unfinished with the floor joist above exposed. They don't have any intention of fully finishing this 11 by 12 foot room. He uses a small office. Most of his work is done out of the house, but when he does need to get some work done at home, he likes to be able to escape to a small room, and he likes to have some quiet music playing while he works. I'm going to say headphones, but let's keep going.
He's going to ask.
He still needs to be able to hear if anything important is happening in other parts of the house, though. Open back headphones. What with his teenagers and dogs at home? So he's debating whether he should use open back headphones. Mm-hmm. Yes. Or just a pair of speakers, and he'd like our opinions on that. He uses a 2018 MacBook Pro while he's in the office, but the sound of his built-in speakers doesn't cut it for him. It is terrible.
Yes.
There's only a single electrical wall outlet in there, although another could probably be added quite easily since the house's electrical panel is inside the same room. He's tried using his AirPods Pro 2, but he finds they get uncomfortable in his ears very quickly because they suck. He's also never found any over-ear headphones that he enjoys wearing for more than an hour. It seems his head size is larger than average. Humble brag. Too. But his ears and ear canals are smaller than average. It's just a strange combination. It makes me think egg-like shapes. But let's keep going. So headphone and earphone comfort are a challenge for him. Plus, there's the whole wanting to hear what's happening elsewhere in the house factor to consider. Mm-hmm. He has a pair of passive speakers in mind. He'd need to add some sort of external device to his MacBook Pro to get those running, right? Mm-hmm. Or there are self-powered speakers to consider. He didn't want to specify a budget because he'd like our input on how much he should spend on this, what will it cost, and what we recommend for either open back headphones or a speaker setup in this scenario. Dazz is one who he enjoys good sound.
Oh, yes.
So that is part of the problem with recommendations for Dazz because I enjoy good sound. Mm-hmm. Rob enjoys good sound, but I also enjoy not paying a lot of money for things and convenience.
Yeah.
So my initial reaction to this, of course, was open back headphones because that is the good sound option. Mm-hmm. You get some Audi's or something like that. You play them low. You will hear things. In fact, those, what's the name of those stupid headphones that are in the other room? Remember the stupid looking ones I did that were like the audio file, but they were like $150 or $100 or $250.
I don't remember the name of those at all.
I will find out. Okay. I will find out and I will link it up here and we'll talk about it in a second.
But they were pretty heavy, weren't they?
They're not. They're not. They're very comfortable and they have very low clamping pressure. That was my biggest problem with them. Is I turn my head and they slide off. Right. But if he's got a big noggin, then
that might be just what he wants.
solves that problem. And I could hear everything that was going on in the room. So that would be my solution to this because these are like planar magnetic or electrostatic. I don't remember which. They have good sound and they probably fit you well. Better than they fit me. And even if they fit exactly the same, the low clamping pressure means that they are not uncomfortable. They will stay comfortable. They also have those weird little pads on your head that kind of keeps off the crown. I don't know what you call the, is this a crown? The horn? I don't know. The very top of your head.
The very top of your head, yeah.
That little pointy bit that everybody thinks they don't have, but I do. And so that would be the headphone recommendations I have. Okay. But my real recommendation for you, Bluetooth speaker.
Oh, okay.
I review so many of these things, and most of them are pretty good. Okay. You can look at some of the reviews and stuff, but Soundcore, almost anything Soundcore makes is worth it. Okay. And you're sitting close enough so like the M600, you could actually put it there and get pseudo surround sound out of it. That's how, I would get the bigger one, not the newer one that I just reviewed. The bigger one, that's the older version. I think, I don't remember what it's called. I'll link that up too. But the idea here is that you could play at any volume. You don't have headphones on.
Yeah.
It sounds pretty good. Yeah. Which is, you're at low volume. If you think you're going to get high fidelity, you really do need volume to get enough bass and enough.
Well, there's no getting around the fact that just to reach the threshold of audibility for bass, the volume level has to be higher. So, if this is just background, you have it on while you're working. It helps you relax. It helps you concentrate. But obviously, you're not playing it so loud that it's distracting you from your work. Then it's going to be pretty tough to get really satisfying bass from any setup, regardless of what it is.
So the Soundcore Motion X600 is the portable speaker I found while I was talking to you.
Okay.
And that one I think would be good for this. To me, then you have something that you can have in your office and just live in there.
Yeah.
You have it plugged in all the time. And then occasionally, if you're like, oh, I want to go take this someplace else in the house.
Yeah.
It's still good.
And
it's still good for all of that.
Even if, as he was sort of hinting at, he runs out of electrical wall outlets, it doesn't really need one to run. It's a portable speaker. Right. You could charge it elsewhere and just bring it into the office for the times that you need it, and it'll run off its battery and not take up a wall outlet in there. So yeah, that's a very good all-around solution. I like that.
And the other one, the headphones I was talking about, the Synaptic SE1 wireless ribbon headphones. These are about $199.
Okay.
And I think that those are probably, if you're going to go headphones, the perfect solution for you. But and we've had people who have bought them based on my review and have reported back that they're like, I can't believe how good these sound, but they also feel very much like plastic. So
sure.
That was my review.
That Soundcore, the Motion X600 speaker, around what price point was that one coming in at?
Let me click
I know it's not crazy expensive because Soundcore never is. Yeah.
Yeah, they are find $signed. $200.
Okay.
At least they were. This new smaller one, which it might be able to find it cheaper now. There's a new one that's smaller.
Okay.
That I don't think sounds as it definitely it doesn't have as good as pseudo surround effect. This one I think is better than that. So,
but in answer to Dazz's question of around how much do we expect him to spend, Tom's answer is about $200.
About $200.
Both solutions are right around there. Now I have zero disagreements with those recommendations. I wholeheartedly endorse those. I've got some alternatives, and actually this is kind of good because these are a little bit less expensive. So you're just like, okay, I don't want to spend $200. Is there anything that I might consider that costs a bit less? Right now, I actually talked about them a little bit earlier in a previous question, but Sennheiser's HD599 headphones, they're selling them at a remarkably good price on Amazon for $130 these days. And these headphones have long been my go-to. I've gone through different ones. They're now up to the 599. There was I think it was like a 590s, and then the 593s, and then the 595s, and the number's just gone up a little bit over time, but now they're onto the 599s. These are supremely comfortable. I've got a bigger than average noggin as far as my skull size goes, and I've never found headphones that are more comfortable to wear for long periods of time than this very series of headphones. Tremendously comfortable to wear. I really, really like their sound quality, but I will say, if there is anywhere that they are lacking, it is in bass extension and output. First of all, they are open back. You can hear what's going on around you. So yeah, you're not going to have closed back boomy type of bass going on, but they just overall lack a little bit of bass extension and output. Not as little as the 5.5 series, the 5.55s, for example. They're a little more extended than that. But yeah, they wouldn't be what I would call bass heavy headphones whatsoever. So there's actually the current lineup in the HD 500 series, even though the number went down to the 560S, adding that S on the end of it makes them a higher end model than the 599s. These ones for $180, so getting very close to the type of price range that Tom explained, but still slightly less expensive. These would be my go-to for outright open back headphone sound quality right now. The bass is remarkably extended and good for open back headphones. Still not going to have the boominess of closed back headphones, but really, really impressive performance from the 560Ss. The thing is, the clamping force on these ones is noticeably tighter than the HD 599s. I can certainly notice it for sure. And so if you don't like a clamping force, it's not that they're uncomfortable because they're lightweight and they still got a very nice padded surround around your ears. Nothing touches your ears at all. It's just completely surrounding your ears and really, really still comfortable to wear, but certainly a tighter clamping force, and the headband design is a little bit different as well versus the 599s. So I think the 599s win for sheer comfort, but I think the 560Ss are that little bit better for sound quality, especially for bass extension. Now, one other thing, just to address the fact that you said you already have a pair of passive speakers on hand that you might want to use. So you could certainly connect a Fosse amplifier. I would recommend one to you that has a USB connection. It's not completely necessary because you could use like a headphone jack to RCA adapter cable. That would function, but it's that much nicer to have the USB control. I'm going to point you to Fosse's DA2120A, and that goes for $100. certainly at low volume levels in a tiny room like you're talking about, have no problem driving the speakers. It's 50 watts a channel, but you're never going to be using more than that in the setup that you described. And could just plug in with a PC connection. It is a USB-B plug on the back of the Fosse, but they give you that cable in the box, so it'll plug right in, and they definitely specify it does work with Max. And it even has a subwoofer output in case you, the bass head Dazz, ever wants to add a subwoofer to the setup. You have the option with that DA2120A from Fosse. So for $100, that would get the job done too.
All right. Chris, last week we discussed how to directly A/B compare different pairs of speakers at home, and Chris appreciated our advice. He figures he will definitely give some SVS speakers a try to start so he can compare them to his current Klipsch speakers, the only brand he has ever owned. Mm-hmm. He's already familiar with SVS since he has a pair of their subs that are actually SVS subs, not Klipsch. When he realized he hadn't mentioned that last time, no desire to replace those. He told us if he finds some speakers that he likes a lot more than Klipsch, he intends to replace his 5 floor-level speakers, but leave his pair of SVS subs and his 4 overhead speakers as is. Tom made an offhand joke about how he ended up wanting to replace his overhead speakers too, but for real, how serious was I being about that? Probably not at all. To be honest with you, I mean, there's no world in which I think you should.
Okay.
I just...
That has cleared up that.
There you go. Would it genuinely be a good idea to also replace his overhead speakers? We seem to always say that just about any half-decent speakers would do for overhead, so maybe put it another way, could he actually benefit in a worthwhile way from replacing his 4 overhead speakers along with his 5 floor-level speakers so they all match? No.
That's the default answer, and the slightly more expanded answer is you are going to find out. You're going to find out, first of all, with your auditions of just pairs of speakers to begin with, if there are any speakers that you like a whole lot better than your Klipsch speakers, and then you're going to replace the 5 speakers as you intend to do, or maybe you only start with the front 3, or maybe you only start with the front left and right, and you run a phantom center for a while. Nothing wrong with doing any of those things in stages like that, but once you have your intended replacement of your 5 floor-level speakers, you're going to be able to tell us if you're like, oh yeah, the overhead speakers I already had in place there, totally fine. Couldn't care less about the slight timbre mismatch of my overhead speakers versus my 5 floor level. Or you're going to come back and tell us, you know what? I replaced the 5 floor level and I can hear the difference between them and the overheads. And now I want to upgrade my overheads too. And we're going to be able to say, okay, here's the ones you should get if those are the new 5 floor level speakers, whatever they end up being, and you let us know. So there's certainly no reason that you have to order new overheads at the very same time. You can get them later. It will be no problem. And you're going to be able to tell us in the future what your experience was.
Yes. He currently has a pair of Klipsch tower speakers up front. He always pictured replacing them with another pair of towers. SVS doesn't seem to have any limitation on their free 2-way shipping offer, so if he brings in a pair of SVS towers to Audition, he can still send those back without any financial risk, right? Yes.
That is correct. Yeah, they will amazingly take back even the PB16 Ultra pair of Gigantor speakers that no delivery person wants to deal with. They'll take those back for free too.
But what about other brands if he decides he wants to hear more candidates? We mentioned Aperion, but they actually say on their website how they now charge a 10% restocking fee for any returns.
Yeah.
I know that.
Yeah, that has changed. It is not free 2-way shipping from Aperion any longer, so that changes the equation substantially.
Yeah. If we were to bring in a few pair of bookshelf speakers, which obviously cost less to ship back and forth, can you reasonably make the assumption that towers from the same brand and series will basically sound the same, but just play louder and lower?
Not entirely, no.
You would. I would like to say yes.
Right.
I would like to say yes, and I think in some instances you can say yes.
Yes, in some cases that is pretty much what's going on. There are
feel
some
that way
though.
about SVS. I would feel somewhat that way about Aperion.
Mm-hmm. I feel that way about Ascend. If you're within the same series, which I like, because in their SE series, their signature series, they don't have towers. They have a large bookshelf with a matching pedestal stand that makes it look like a tower, but the pedestal stand is not part of the acoustics of the speaker whatsoever. But if you're in the RAL ribbon,
I remember his
series,
room being kind of small. Am I imagining that?
I don't recall clearly at this moment. Sorry.
I would very much hesitate to put tower speakers in anything other than a cavernous room. I don't see any reason for them most of the time. I've experienced deleterious effects of having tower speakers in a small space. Oh, but they can play louder and lower. So what? You know, a Lamborghini can go like 300 miles per hour, but if you never go over 75 or 80,
right?
You know, what good does it do you to have that big old engine in there that's just sucking down gas all the time? It sounds, nice when it's, idling, but that's literally the only benefit of having it. And there's so many downsides. Here is the same case most of the time.
We also suggested to you, our method of doing these A/B comparisons, which is to actually roll off the bass. It very much intentionally roll off the bass of the speakers when you're doing the comparison, because you've got this pair of SVS subs, you're happy with their performance, you've set them up for nice uniform linear response, and there's no reason to be like, well, these speakers can play down into the subwoofer region, so I'm going to choose them, and I'm going to not notice that, oh wait, that extra bass was actually masking a bunch of differences in the mid-range and treble that I didn't notice because all that bass was playing. We're like, no, filter that off, set those speakers to small during the audition, perhaps even raise the crossover frequency, and then just turn the subwoofers off so that you're really comparing the mid-range and treble much more so than the tremendous masking effects that the bass have. So I don't feel too bad, particularly with the brands that we always recommend around here, auditioning the bookshelf models as the ones that you're bringing in for audition purposes. I think that's very okay to do for the brands that we're talking about, because you're not going to get those masking effects of the bass if you were to go with the towers anyway.
Yeah. If you were to bring in a few pairs of bookshelf speakers, I already said that. For anything that he decides to keep, there isn't much downside to bringing in the bookshelf model, because those will end up being his surrounds. But his whole desire was to hear some direct A/B comparison in his home. So how fair is it to compare his current Klipsch towers to bookshelf speakers from other brands? If you compare them in the way that we talk about, then it's fine.
Yeah.
But if you decide to run them full range because reasons...
Right. Yeah, don't do that. That wouldn't be fair.
Then it would be very unfair. Yeah. And your Klipsch towers will probably, quote unquote, win because they play more bass.
Now, there is a very tricky part to all of this, no matter what you're bringing in to audition against your Klipsch towers, which is that those Klipsch towers are unequivocally way more efficient than just about anything.
You have to level match them.
That you're going to be bringing. And level matching them could be a non-trivial... kind of difficult
you might
thing.
need an amp with a volume control, honestly.
Furthermore, a lot of Klipsch speakers are significantly within themselves, just within that one speaker, more efficient in the treble than they are in the mid-range, and kind of have a pretty tipped up treble response. So it can be a little bit difficult in level matching, because if you're like, if I just play pink noise and I level match, it's slightly unfair to the Klipsch speaker because the mid-range is more recessed because the treble was so boosted. So you kind of need to play a range of individual tones, and you might have to realize that you kind of have to compromise and pick your poison about where they level match. And that gets really tricky because you're even if you're aware of, it turns out I know going in that the upper end of the treble of these Klipsch speakers is always going to be louder than any other speakers I'm comparing them to. And the mid-range is always a little bit quieter because I chose this compromised position in the middle of the lower treble or the upper mid-range. That's where I level matched these speakers, against the different pair of speakers. Even going in, it's really hard for your brain to ever separate. It's just going to notice the difference between those speakers. And if you have a preference, it's going to become readily available. So this might require you to do quite a bit of back and forth. It might require you to do some experiments where you're basically only listening to isolated treble, and you level match just the treble of the Klipsch speakers to whatever you're comparing them to, and then listen to some isolated mid-range and some isolated lower mid-range, and level match independently every time you do those comparisons, if you really, really want to make it fair. Klipsch speakers make it kind of tough to really do a fair shake comparison. You might have to do quite a bit of back and forth, but if you're willing to do that, then using bookshelf speakers to do it, no problem.
Well, I was going to tell people that the noises they were hearing from outside was my son mowing the yard. But instead, the noises that you're hearing from outside is weather that has just rolled right in. It is coming down right now, and there's thunder and lightning and all kinds of stuff. So it's supposed to be going on for the next, basically to the end of the podcast.
Okay. we're only here for 20 more minutes, so.
Yeah. So sorry about that if you're suddenly having to pee and you don't understand why. It's because of the rain.
It's all cursed in the background here, where fingers are still crossed, fingers and toes now.
Henry's feeling like he's in a real conundrum about how to proceed with his beloved movie collection. He invested in the Panasonic UB9000 Ultra HD Blu-ray player and has built up his collection of physical discs. He also has an Apple TV 4K, which he uses for any streaming-only content that isn't available on disc, or something he knows he'll only watch once and doesn't feel compelled to purchase. He has avoided buying, download, or streaming-only movies and shows because he doesn't trust those services to always provide access forever and ever.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
Not an unfounded concern. Yeah.
Considering. Thank you, Sony.
Right.
He has considered putting together a Plex server, but getting it all set up and backing up all his physical discs would really be a lot of time and effort, and it still requires obtaining the movie files in the highest quality in one way or another, and he'd still be buying discs anyways.
Yeah.
The problem, of course, is that buying discs is becoming more and more difficult. In this area, Best Buy stopped selling discs in their stores, just as they have everywhere else. Target doesn't have them anymore either, because I was there this weekend.
That's just it.
They had very few, and the Ultra HD Blu-rays were like $32. Mm-hmm. Like, oh my God! I thought it'd be on sale here, but they're not. But Target and Walmart have also either completely emptied out their physical disc sections, or they've drastically shrunken them to the point it isn't really worth looking there anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So what does that leave him? Kaleidoscape? He likes that they seem to clearly be committed to offering the highest audio and video quality, but their equipment is so darn expensive. And then you're completely locked into their system. And if you wanted to import all of his existing collection that he has on the discs, sure, they'd have their disc-to-digital service, so you don't have to pay full price, but it still isn't free.
No.
And the disc-to-digital discount isn't available for every movie. Mm-hmm. So what do we predict is going to happen in coming years? How do we think someone like him should proceed? Okay, so
I feel for him. I'm there too. I'm right there with you. Yeah, there's no obviously like, oh, this is clearly the solution. It's nothing quite that easy for us to point to. Yeah,
I will say, I do agree with you that buying digital is a fool's errand. It really makes the most sense to buy it from Apple, because no matter how bad they screw up, they have so much money that they can kind of coast for another 50 years.
Right.
If you're going to buy digital, that's the way. I think that's the way to go.
To give them some credit too, they've been remarkably good about, if you bought a version years ago and now there's a new HD or Ultra HD version, they gave you that upgraded version for no extra cost. I mean, like, I have to give them some credit for that. You can't even necessarily expect a company to do that. They didn't tell you beforehand that was always the deal. So I give them some credit for that. Particularly. You've bought a ton of discs. It sounds like you probably haven't redeemed all the codes all along, but a ton of those codes, even the ones that have expiry dates, a lot of them still work. Warner Brothers won't, but almost everybody else's, even if it's past expiry, will still work. And I'm like, you already have them, right? You already own them, so redeeming them in an iTunes library is not like the worst thing, because if you never use them, okay, no problem, except for the time you put in entering codes, and if you do ever use them, then great, they're there. You have sort of a backup to your physical discs. So I regret that I never redeemed all my codes going along, although a ton of them wouldn't work anyway, because almost all the ones I had were ultraviolet, and then that went kaput, and we never had movies anywhere in Canada, so there was no transferring ultraviolet to any other service, and that would have been a horrible experience if my whole library had been ultraviolet and disappeared on me up here in Canada. So yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I don't want to only have digital content lockers and libraries, because they have definitely disappeared in the past. But if you have the option of redeeming what you already own in iTunes, I would probably go ahead and do that as sort of a backup scenario, just to have it.
Yeah, so my thing is, and I think maybe this is what you're thinking as well, discs, while they technically can last forever, it only takes one accident, one mistake, for a disc to get scratched or just stop working or whatever, for whatever reason. My parents, in fact, I was over their house this weekend, and I went to throw something away, and there was a DVD in the garbage. I'm like, why is this DVD in garbage? It just stopped playing. It would get to a point, and it would just stop.
Yeah.
And it's not like my parents watch or abuse their movies in any way, shape, or form. They don't watch them that often, and they certainly don't scratch them or anything. But they could not get this to play anymore, and that is not unheard of. So I really feel like you are the person, and I know that you don't want to do it, and I understand it, because I don't want to do it either, who who cares enough about their collection that they should have digital backups on hand just to ensure that they always have access to them.
Yeah.
So you are the person who should be setting up a Plex library. You are the person who should import all their stuff. It's going to be a huge investment in time up front because of all the stuff, your current library.
Yeah.
But once you get it all there, then every time you buy a disc, you just do it. And it won't be as hard.
So I have a little tweak on that because one of the sort of downsides of Plex is that the Plex player still essentially requires you to convert your discs to MKV files. That's what Plex is going to play back most readily. And, using Make MKV, the software that everybody uses to create their MKV backups, it's by no means difficult, but there is still some tedium in just the process of converting to MKVs. There's a few check boxes that you have to make sure that you've looked through, and some discs make it kind of difficult because they give you 1,000 different tracks because they're intentionally trying to make it difficult to find the one that is the actual movie file. And so, there's things like that to deal with if you're doing the conversion. So the little tweak on it, because here's the thing, massively sized USB hard drives are really inexpensive now. So, I mean, it's in no way comparable to the cost of getting a Kaleidoscape server to get yourself some really high capacity, 20 terabyte USB hard drives and store a whole bunch of disks that way. And the Make MKV software you can use for free as long as you're willing to look up the authorization code every month and input it because it's still in beta all these decades later. And then getting a PC optical drive with the ability to flash its firmware to something that lets you copy Ultra HD Blu-ray discs. All of that is explained in Make MKV's excellent forums and tutorials. And there are people there who are just like, yeah, here's the drive. I will just sell it to you. It's ready to go if you don't want to deal with any of that firmware flashing on your own. And they don't charge an arm and a leg to do it. And it's well worth it if you just don't want the hassle of doing it yourself. So the little twist on all of this is Make MKV, the software, lets you just do a one-for-one image backup of your disk. So there's no conversion going on. It's just an ISO or a BDMV folder file that you just plop onto a hard drive, and there it is. The problem is that Plex can't play those back. But there are the Zadoo players, which are not super expensive, and they will just play back those image files no problem for you, and they will give you a poster interface very similar to Plex's or Kaleidoscape's. Not as nice as Kaleidoscape's, definitely not, but it'll give you that sort of poster interface. It's not just like literally a bunch of file names that you're going through, and they'll just play them back directly from the image backups, which are much easier to deal with than trying to do the MKV conversion process. I shouldn't say easier, but just less time consuming. So I agree with Tom. Like, you've amassed this disc collection. It would be really nice to have them backed up in some form or fashion. And given how inexpensive hard drives are, and given how relatively easily you could do like these image backup versions, and given that the Zadoo players are not tremendously expensive, I think that's, sort of the way to proceed with what you have already. So then there's like, is there the argument for getting Kaleidoscape? And I can make an argument, as expensive as the equipment is. First of all, you can definitely find people who are selling used Kaleidoscape equipment, and it absolutely still works with their system, because many people are upgrading to the newest and the fastest. And if you're not worried about the sheer speed of things, and you're not expanding this to work in, 20,000 rooms in a mansion, if you really just need it for 1 or 2 rooms, getting some used Kaleidoscape equipment is certainly a way to bring the cost of the hardware down. And then there's kind of an argument, if you're like, what I really want is the absolute best quality, like, it's becoming more and more the case that even Ultra HD Blu-rays, because many studios are not willing to pay for the 100 gigabyte triple layer discs. They're only willing to pay for the 66 gigabyte dual layer disc. We're seeing movies that are over 3 hours long being crammed down onto 66 gigabyte discs. You get them on Kaleidoscape and they're like 138 gigabytes, like larger than any Ultra HD Blu-ray disc could hold. But they're not applying as severe compression to them, and you're getting the very highest quality possible through Kaleidoscape. If that's what 100% matters to you the most, that would be the argument for maybe looking for some used Kaleidoscape equipment. The downside is if Kaleidoscape ever goes bankrupt again, because they went bankrupt already once before and then came back from the dead, if they ever go bankrupt again, then, you know, with Kaleidoscape, at least you have the movies downloaded onto the server. So they've always said, if we ever go out of business, you'll still be able to play whatever you already have downloaded. They're not going to do some weird DRM death, you know, code thing. They've said themselves that that's their commitment to their customers. But you obviously won't be able to re-download things if you were, you know, doing the thing. You ran out of Kaleidoscape server space and you moved some things off of it so that you could download new ones. You won't be able to download them if they ever go out of business. So there's nothing of these is zero risk, but I can make the argument there. So I think the key to it is maybe looking for some used Kaleidoscape equipment, because I think you're the type of person who might appreciate the maximum quality that they are offering.
I'll be honest, the MKV or whatever it is, conversion and all that stuff is one of the bigger stumbling blocks for me personally. Like,
yeah.
I've done stuff like this before. I've uploaded, you know, files to my Mac or whatever when we were traveling before we moved to Australia, and I did it, and it wasn't a huge deal. No. So it's not. I understand the concept behind it, but it's also it thinking about trying to do it for every movie I own.
That's right.
Just sounds
there's some time,
tedious.
there's some check boxes, and but the image
being able
backups,
to just
the one-to-one image backups,
just being able to do the ISO, I think,
just
to me that takes a huge roadblock out of doing this.
Yeah,
so
like there's
we'll
obviously still time because it has to read the disc and write it to a hard drive, but like your effort as the user
start and walk away.
Yeah, your effort as a user is absolutely minimal. It is literally just backup, and that's it. It's just one-to-one image file,
and I think
no checkboxes.
That might be what pushes him over the edge.
For the collection that you already have, I would probably certainly, like, even if you do end up getting some used Kaleidoscape equipment, that disc to digital is not free. You know, if you're spending $5 to $10 for everything you already own and you got a big collection, that's thousands and thousands of dollars. And then, like you say, not everything is available on Kaleidoscape. So I think it makes sense for you know, posterity purposes, for keeping what you already have, to probably, you know, get a massive terabyte hard drive and to do those one-to-one backups. Even if you don't invest in a way to play them back, just having the backups is a good idea.
You should get a RAID drive too, because if you don't want to go through all this array and then have to lose it because the drive failed.
Yeah,
and you do the whole thing again. Believe me. Toke in Denmark. First off, Toke wanted to share a story about some recent modifications he made to his setup. A while back, before he started writing us, he was using a pair of tower speakers as his front left and right, along with a pair of DIY 15-inch subwoofers, both positioned at the front of his room. These are very good-looking speakers.
Yes.
I don't necessarily love the positioning of the subs.
Well, that was before he talked to us.
This is before. His room is L-shaped, and the total volume air is around 3,000 cubic feet. Circumstances became such they needed to downsize a bit and free up some floor space. The dual 15-inch subs had to go, and he decided to give our advice a try and discovered that a pair of bookshelf speakers as his front, left, and right really did have enough output compared to his towers that, in blind comparison, he couldn't notice the downgrade, quote-unquote. Could these Tom and Rob guys actually be onto something? Remember that dude I was just saying you don't need tower speakers?
That's right.
He has already obtained 4 acoustic on-wall subwoofers, each with dual 10-inch drivers, giving him 8 drivers in total. He was a big fan of using WinISD to simulate different subwoofer designs, and combining those 4 on-wall subs with their matching acoustic external amps indicated that, by the simulated numbers, he should be able to get the output and extension he was looking for. But those simulations couldn't really tell him about optimal placement in his room. So when we said he should stack them into 2 pairs and then put those 2 pairs across the room from each other, he decided to give it a shot, and he was mostly, don't like the qualification, but whatever. He was mostly happy with the results, so we were 2 for 2. It sounds like 1.5 for 2, but whatever, nerd. He's never one to leave any stone unturned, though, so he kept plugging away with his WinISD simulations to see if you could eke out any more performance. He was always a little suspect of the acoustic external amps because they were spec'd to deliver 500 watts into 4 ohms, but 450 watts into 8 ohms. One of these numbers is not like the other. One of these numbers is not the same. For those who don't know the joke, when you go from 8 ohms to 4 ohms, you should double the number of watts. You shouldn't go. You shouldn't
50 watts
half.
more. Yeah.
Yeah. 50 watts is not it. Yeah. He settled on using his mini DSP to EQ his subwoofer setup so that it had nearly flat output down to 30 Hz, but then a natural roll-off below that so his subwoofers and amps weren't being overdriven. When ISD indicated that subwoofer drivers themselves, all of them had greater mass than they ought to be able to play lower.
If they had greater mass.
If they
had just
greater mass.
Click the little increase the mass of these theoretical drivers in the WinISD software.
So if they had greater mass, they ought to be able to play lower, all else remaining equal. But we strongly advised him against trying to somehow add weight to all of his. I remember this question.
Yes, that's right.
Weight to all of his subwoofer drivers, and he wound up agreeing with us once again. I think he wanted to glue.
Yeah, some little weights to the dust caps.
Weights to the dust caps.
I would not do that.
How could that go wrong?
Yeah.
He could just leave it alone, though. And another thing WinISD indicated was that if he had a bit more air volume within each of his 4 on-wall subwoofer enclosures, he might get lower output, even if he actually had fewer subwoofers driven. Since it was theoretically possible to try that out in a non-destructive way, he went ahead and did it. He removed one of the 10-inch drivers from each of his subwoofers, so now he only had 4 10-inch drivers, 1 driver in each enclosure, and he plugged the 4 holes with some leftover MDF that he had on hand. Boy, dude, my whole life I've never been this curious about anything enough to do this much work. He remeasured the raw output from each sub and success. He now had greater output everywhere below 75 Hertz, not a ton, but it lined up with WinISD simulations. But a new problem arose as our acoustic amplifier started cutting out due to overcurrent protection once he had all 4 enclosures hooked up again. But you can see his measurements testing one enclosure at a time that the subwoofer drivers themselves were not the limiting factor. So he got a new amp. Maybe he sold those 4 drivers to help pay for it.
Yeah.
It's an ICE Class D amp, 2 channels, ready to deliver 250 watts into each channel at 4 ohms. While the acoustics had been spec'd for 500 watts into a single 4 ohm channel, he suspected that it was a peak power rating, not a sustained RMS rating. So while the number on that spec sheet for the new ICE amp appeared lower, in real world use, it did the trick. Mm-hmm. With all 4 subs hooked up, he achieved a significant increased power at his actual listening location. There's a graph.
Yes, there is.
And you can see it. The line is higher.
Yes, it is.
It's got a big bump.
4 10-inch drivers instead of 8, but more amplifier power and more volume inside of the sealed enclosures of those 4 subs.
So he would dare to say, at his preferred listening level, which is not quite full cinema reference volume, he managed to get back to the deep bass output levels he used to have with his dual 15-inch subs. And with a whole lot more floor space now, he's finally satisfied that he has fully optimized his current subwoofers. Which means there's no question. That's the end of it.
that was the first part. He does have a question about something else, though.
He says he currently optimizes. He has fully optimized his current subwoofers, probably. Yes. Now to a question. We have previously linked to the subwoofer output capabilities chart that was originally posted over AV forums in the UK. He certainly thinks it is handy for quickly getting to the idea of what to expect output-wise for many of the most popular subwoofer models that people might be considering giving a particular room size. Mm-hmm. But one thing that isn't immediately obvious from looking at the chart is how your distance from seat to subs might play into things. It is mentioned that all of the posted output figures have been modified, if necessary, to CEA 2010 standardized measurements, performing with a 2-meter distance from sub to mic. So if your actual distance is, say, 3 or 4 meters instead of 2 meters, wouldn't that mean you'd actually have less output than the immediate glance at the chart would indicate? Nothing wrong with the chart itself, of course, but isn't seating distance from the subs something that people should be sure to factor into their decision? And naturally, a room that isn't fully closed off and sealed would be a factor too, right? Remember, and I have written an article about this, and it's important to remember here, what pressurization actually means.
Yeah.
Okay. What does it mean to pressurize a space? What it means is that as you move around the space in your room, the bass does not change in volume from one place to the other. Yeah. All things being equal, if it not including room modes and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But if you were to pressurize the space, that is the level of the bass everywhere. Mm-hmm. The distance between you and the sub is immaterial. The bass has bounced around the room 2 or 3 times before it ever got to you. So the fact that you are sitting closer to it means nothing. It should be the same volume everywhere. So that is where you are thinking of a speaker. A speaker, the closer
Sure.
you sit, the louder it is because you're getting direct sound. A subwoofer, it's the entire space. And yes, if the room is open, that entire cubic volume of air makes a difference, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how much the whole space radiates bass.
Yeah.
Not so much the fact that you were sitting closer to it.
Yeah, the part of the not having a sealed room, that just means you have to go and measure everywhere that the air can possibly move and then put that into the chart with the new much higher cubic footage. That's the part. I mean, I agree with you. Many people are just going to measure their living room and be like, that's the cubic footage.
Or the corner of their living room that they put their
home theater area of the room. Many people will, but that's on them. That's not the chart's fault.
Yes.
But the other part is, the confusing thing is, of course, there are the CEA measurements where they're like, this is referenced to 1 meter or this is referenced to 2 meters. And the CEA 2010 measurements that are referenced to 1 meter show a higher decibel level. So it's completely reasonable for someone to go, oh, okay, well, distance is a factor.
In an open field or on a pole in the middle of nowhere.
That's right.
There is no room.
It's a ground plane measurement with no walls or ceiling around. It's a semi-anechoic measurement, those CEA 2010. So there's a very understandable question here, but once you get it into an enclosed room, then, if you're actually achieving full preservation, it will make a difference, I will say. Like, if you go down this chart, right, you go up to the big cubic footage and you go down this list into the subs that can't pressurize in those room space, then your distance from sub to seat will start to make a difference because they are not able to pressurize that amount of volume of air. So now you are getting into more of a case where you're hearing some of that direct impact that has lessened by the time you're experiencing it. So there is a factor there. You're not incorrect at all, and the intuitive understanding completely makes sense. But if you're getting into this is pressurizing this cubic footage of air, all of those ones where the color changes in that chart, well, then you're good to go, and it doesn't really matter where you sit.
That's right.
I think we can do at least one more. Yeah.
I think there's only one more.
I think there's two.
Beau was turned onto us by a Patreon group from a different YouTube channel. He's hoping we can help him understand a setting in his Denon X6200W AV receiver. Mm-hmm. The 6200W has 9 amps built in but can process 11 channels. He fully understands that if he goes into the receiver's amps assigned settings and he sets it to 11 channel setup, it forces him to choose either a pair of preouts, chooses one pair of preouts so that external amp can power one pair of speakers while his Denon powers the other 9. Mm-hmm. But physically, the X6200W has 11 pairs of speaker buy-in posts. If he sets this amp assigned to 9 channels, it still lets him select what seems to be an 11-channel speaker configuration. 5 channels plus surround backs, plus top fronts and top rears.
Mm-hmm. That's 11.
It is. And if he looks at the on-screen terminal configuration, it shows a speaker wire plugged into all 11 of the 6200's buy-in posts with no pre-out plugs being used at all, but some of them are now labeled as auto switching. Mm-hmm. Could we please explain what all of that means and how it actually works in real-world use? My brain is getting kind of fried over here, so let me look at this again.
I can cover this one for you. Yeah. So if you want the single sentence answer that helps you understand this, it would be Oro 3D, because that's primarily where this comes into play. So you have a whole bunch of different configuration options in your 6200W. Just keep in mind there are 9 amplifiers. The AV receiver itself can never power more than 9 speakers itself. That's just the end of that. But you're right, there are 11 pairs of binding posts. You could physically plug in 11 speakers to this receiver, and you're like, well, what's the point of that? Why would I plug 11 speakers into the AV receiver itself when we know it can only power 9 of them at a time? So that's where this idea of auto switching comes in. It's saying, well, you can have 2 different 9 speaker configurations where the first of those 9 speaker configurations works with some audio formats like Dolby Atmos and DTS-X, and the second 9 speaker configuration where 2 of those speakers changed to something else only works with a different audio format like Oro 3D. So the easy example is, let's say you have your 7 floor level speakers, so traditional 5.1 plus surround backs, and then you've assigned the 4 overhead speakers as, let's say, front heights and surround heights or something along those lines, right? Atmos and DTS:X or Atmos anyway, DTS:X might. No, Atmos and DTS:X will not use in your 6200W surround height speakers. They could use front heights, they could use rear heights, they could use top fronts, they could use top rears, but they won't use surround heights. But Oro 3D will. So Oro 3D might use the 9 built-in amplifiers to do 5.1 on the bed layer, and then front heights and surround heights, and those are your 9 speakers. But then when you switch to Atmos, it'll do, like, let's just simplify, you could say it'll do 5.1 on the bed layer, let's forget about surround backs, and then it'll do, like, front heights and rear heights, or something along those lines. So you've swapped one of those overhead pairs of speakers for a pair of speakers that only works in Oro 3D. The other scenario where this comes into play is front wides, right? Only some audio formats use front wides, and front wides are an option on the 6200W. So Atmos, for example, can use front wides. So you might have 5.1 plus front wides, that's 7 of your 9 speakers, and then a pair of top fronts or front heights. And then Oro comes along and it's like, well, I can't use front wides, but I'll let you hook up an alternate pair of speakers, again, surround heights maybe, and I'll use those instead, but I won't use front wides. So that's why you can physically connect 11 speakers, but only use 9 of them at a time. You have 2 different 9 speaker configurations, and it's the audio format's compatibility that chooses which 9 of those speakers get used at any time. Hope that makes sense.
Yeah. I wrote an article about it a long time ago. I forgot about it. Why are there extra speaker outputs in the back of your receiver? All right, who do we have left, Rob?
Just Dan. It's a super short question, but yeah, we'll leave that for next week, I suppose, just in case we're short next week. So there we go. We'll get to you next week, Dan.
We want to thank our listeners of the week. To become a listener of the week, support the podcast in some way. Tyler did that by going to avrant.com, clicking on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link, and sending us a PayPal donation. So thank you very much, Tyler.
Yeah, thank you, Tyler. Nice to have that PayPal donation. We appreciate your financial support.
We also want to thank our 133 patrons over at patreon.com, including Toke.
That is for sure. That is patreon.com/AVRant podcast. If you'd like to sign up to make an automatic monthly donation, or come back and sign up again if you left us from before, or your credit card expired and you never updated it. So big thank you to our 133 patrons over there. Toke, thank you for being one of them.
We still got some notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going from Karl, Toke, and Bertrand. Thank you for thanking us.
That's right. I'll say those names one more time. Karl, Toke, and Bertrand. Thank you very much for your notes of gratitude and encouragement. We appreciate it. And a big thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions.
If you want to get your question answered, all you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. For AVRant, I'm Tom Andry.
And I'm Rob H. Now go out and listen to something.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.